You-
accused too, so.
Oh, it's not the Today Show.
Definitely not. So you kicked me under the
So
table.
you guys
the
are,
wrong way.
or, you got a script or?
Are your feet even
No.
touching the ground?
No, we're winging it, huh?
So your feet aren't even touching.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I could see the clock.
Mm-hmm.
That would help.
I could have my phone in front of me and check it
I mean,
incessantly.
that's it. You can do
Yes.
that.
Or we could text back and forth.
Yeah.
You'll love this because you know how bad I am with my phone. I have a hair appointment later that week, and the hairdresser said, why don't you just put a reminder on the phone? And I said, can do that.
And you couldn't stop it. It just kept going.
No. I figured out. But he's, you know. Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Our Town. Today, my guests are Stephen Crane, the town manager for Longmeadow, and Marie Angelides, the chairman of the select board. We're going to continue a discussion we started about a month ago about the casino/Longmeadow negotiation question. And I don't know about you and how much you've been following it. I've been following it kind of peripherally, having trust in the process and the folks that are representing us, that they're doing the best they can to get the most benefit financially for the town of Longmeadow. When we left off, I'm going to sound ignorant because I have not been following a lot of this. There was an offer on the table by MGM, and there was an offer on the table by the town of Longmeadow, and there was quite a disparity between the two. I'm under the impression that a lot of things have happened, both publicly and behind the scenes, on both sides, to continue forward with this process. I'm also guessing that there are some deadlines that we're coming up against, and maybe that's what prompted the interest in having an update for the town. So the purpose of this discussion is to allow Stephen and Marie, if I may call you that publicly, to update you, the residents, on where we are, how we got there, and possibly, if they can, where we're going to go down the road. So who would like to begin?
I guess I'll start.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for doing this, Arlene. It's really important that the residents understand where we are in this process because it is very, very complicated. And as you said, there was an initial offer that came on the table from MGM, and we responded, and our offer in the form and the numbers were quite different. And
What were those?
The numbers were, they had showed us the Agawam deal, which was like
Like 125 up front and 150 a year or
Yeah.
something like that. And most of the major impacts to be mitigated through a look-back approach.
Right, and the 150 year was for how many years?
15, I think.
Yes.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
The initial,
just to put it
yeah,
in perspective.
Almost all of the agreements that are out there, the initial gambling license or gaming license that the state will grant to the casinos is a 15-year term. So the agreements are all, the surrounding community agreements are usually tied to a 15-year term.
Okay, is that with the expectation that there will be another round of negotiation kinds of things after 15 years, or we don't know, uncharted waters?
Uncharted waters.
Uncharted waters,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the difference between the two was also the form of the contract. As Stephen said, it was look back. So MGM says we really can't decide what the impacts will be or the cost, so let's have a look back of 1 year and 5 years, and then we'll assess. And we actually went to more of a data-driven approach, what we call. We listened to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, we listened to the Mass Gaming Commission, we hired experts, we had 2 sets of experts come in, and they did do the analysis for us on not only what they felt the impacts would be to the town, but the costs.
And now what was you said 125 and then 150, what was Longmeadow's at that time? I don't remember what the
Our
numbers
counter
were.
proposal was $950,000 up front and about $500,000 a year.
Whoa, big, so it's not just a difference. It's
A big difference,
big
but,
difference,
but
it's
really,
negotiating position.
well, it's really not even that sophisticated. It really is the surrounding community agreements, including the Agawam deal, which was the model for what MGM proposed to us, carried almost no money to mitigate traffic impacts or any other kind of impacts that could be predicted up front.
Right.
The process we were on through the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission with an independent traffic consultant that they had hired to peer review MGM's traffic work. And this was a process really that early on MGM encouraged us to participate in, and they commissioned the study.
Right.
Well, the study, the findings didn't really come out until mid-December. By that point, some of the communities had already signed their surrounding community agreements. Long Meadow chose to hold off.
Are we the only community that has held off?
West Springfield
Okay.
has also held off. So West Springfield and Long Meadow held off to see what we, months ago you told us that this was going to be important, and now you're saying this study isn't going to matter. We're going to do a look back. We're going to play it all the way out and see what the study that you commissioned says. And sure enough, the study says, at least for the case of Long Meadow, here are some specific things you need to do to your traffic infrastructure now, because these impacts are knowable and predictable.
Sounds black and white.
Oh yeah, like specific construction recommendations.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
project, it's really traffic signal upgrades. I mean, it's a matter of, it was a part of our petition, these recommendations.
Right.
So they said upgrade your traffic signal equipment and do some monitoring and things like that. And so then we had our own traffic engineering firm take this independent set of recommendations and say, okay, well, what would that cost us? And so we developed those costs, and then we said, we acknowledge that the gaming legislation isn't intended to solve existing problems, and that the casinos by the Gaming Commission will only be expected to contribute whatever their fair share, the net.
Yeah.
And so we took what we believe was a reasonable assessment of what MGM's impact on our traffic was going to be, and applied that to the costs that had been developed. And that's, so the numbers weren't pulled out of a hat like we think we deserve this much just because of where we are. It was a derivative of this data-driven process and a formula we came up with that, at the end of the process, when we sent it to MGM, it had been kind of built to that point. We didn't start with a number we wanted to get and then justify it. We said, we played it very straight.
Yeah, good. Okay. One last question, and then you need to continue to bring us up. Is so Agawam, East Long Meadow, Ludlow, maybe Wilbraham
Wilbraham, yeah.
have signed, and they are
Chicopee, Holyoke,
with the same sort of agreement.
Similar form, yeah.
Basically. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that they are already done with? They are now a designated impacted community, or whatever the words are, and that's going forward. They're set, even though they're not as close to this facility as we are.
MGM tied designation of surrounding community with the signing of an agreement.
Okay.
And so
take my candy and I'll
well,
give
and
you
it
the
was part of the
designation.
process because they had a right when they put in their application to designate who the surrounding communities were.
Right.
And so as the agreements came in, that was part of it, and it went into their application. We were still in negotiations, and so West Springfield and this town were not designated when the applications went in. Now, so we come up to January 1st, and so we are not designated. West Springfield is not
Are
designated.
you guys working together?
West Springfield?
Yes.
Not
We're-
really.
Not really.
No.
We've spoken to the new mayor as a courtesy to say, we've been involved heavily in this issue. If you want some information about the process that has come, the regional process, we're happy to talk to you. But really
It's not a concerted.
nothing
No.
further than that. No.
So we're at January 1st.
Yeah.
Their original offer is still their original offer? Is there still their offer?
Yes.
On January 1st, and
We-
yours is still the 900,000?
There's been no counter offer
There's
to
been
our offer.
no closing of that gap.
Well, because it's not just the numbers, it's the form of the agreement
Okay.
and the way we're approaching it. West Springfield was designated voluntarily by MGM early in January, and we are the only community left to approach Mass Gaming Commission to request to be named a surrounding community in regards to this casino.
Okay.
So our attorney put together a very, very well written, in my opinion, petition that was over 200 pages, over 30 exhibits. And that was sent out to them, and we had 15 minutes to make just a very brief presentation. So there was a brief presentation made
When was
with a
that?
slide presentation, and I think it was the 18th?
It was, no, it was, I thought it was January 21st.
Something like that. So
21st, yeah.
mid-January.
Mid-
close enough.
Mid-January, yeah.
And so that presentation was made, and now they have their own traffic experts. We have two sets of traffic experts, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and we hired our own who could put the numbers to the recommendations by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. So there's like 3 sets of experts
Plus the town engineer.
town engineers working on that, and MGM has their set. And so
And is there a big difference in opinion in that arena?
there's a difference in what the meaning of the impacts are, and what to the extent there are impacts. And so they, Mass Gaming Commission asked for more time. It was supposed to be decided by February 6th, and they said we really need to the 18th.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and
that's in our
there's
favor.
a lot of work that
Now,
needs to be done.
is the impact, I don't know if tell me if I'm asking something I shouldn't be asking because it may be confidential in terms of negotiations. You just tell me.
We'll let you know. Most of it's open,
Yeah.
and it's in our petition, and it's been
Okay.
an
Yeah.
open session.
So is the traffic impact throughout the town, that's the big issue that's on the table?
Well, it's what is the level of impact? And
Yeah.
that is something that GPI, the independent peer reviewer, and MGM's consultant have disagreed on. We think GPI has made a compelling case that MGM has undercounted what their impact is going to be.
Vis-a-vis Long Meadow.
Vis-a-vis Long Meadow and all the other towns, quite honestly. Basically, when in traffic projections, when development is done, just kind of take a step back, when a development project comes along of a certain size, you have to do an analysis of what the traffic impact is going to be. And there's the International Traffic Engineers Manual. There's like a couple of different sets of Bibles, if you will,
Sure.
that say if you have this much square footage of retail space, it's going to generate this many car trips. And so there are formulas to this.
Sure.
MGM included some components in its formula, but didn't really fully count, we believe. And I don't think in an attempt to mislead, it just was kind of the subjectivity of the traffic engineer's perspective, whereas our traffic engineer used a different set of standards that are really the ones they used were the one of the metrics that's out there that has been used extensively in Connecticut is the trip, like the car trip per gaming position. And a gaming position is either a seat at a blackjack table or a seat at a slot machine or something like that. And so they felt like MGM's analysis didn't take into consideration that metric.
Right.
And so they beefed up MGM's numbers, and then again they said so when you they said MGM was underreporting by about 20%.
So is the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, does the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission consultant and the private consultant Long Meadow hired, do they agree?
Yes.
Oh, so those two independently
Well,
agreed?
we were using the same numbers, and one of the things that Parsons, our traffic expert, was doing was seeing what would be the cost,
cost to the
of what
town.
GPI. So they're sort of working together, and they don't disagree.
Yeah.
But I'd like to step back on why we keep talking about the traffic.
Yes.
And that is because Mass Gaming Commission in November came out with an analysis on what was the surrounding community, and they really emphasized traffic more than anything else. So a lot of residents will say, well, we're really looking at, there'll be more things than traffic that could affect the town. But right now, they're using that as a measure to
Sure.
see which is considered a surrounding community. But we hired not just a traffic expert, but we also hired someone who would look at all the impacts. Public safety was not considered by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And we hired our own expert that would look at those aspects also. So if residents say it's not just traffic, we're considering that too. Unfortunately, the petition has to emphasize that.
Yeah, I just want to build on that point before you ask a question. We did start months ago in terms of our preparation for this with a very broad spectrum of things we were looking at, because we knew kind of intuitively traffic was going to be a big issue simply because of traffic is a big issue now. And when you look at the things that were identified as impacts under the statute, it was impacts to live entertainment venues or commercial commercial businesses and things like that. We don't have a lot.
Restaurants,
We don't have a lot of that to be impacted.
Right.
But we do have the only north-south bypass for 91, and we knew that 91 was going to be the lifeline to the casino because the exit that's there right now, exit 6, is their front driveway essentially. So, but we said we don't want to limit ourselves to only traffic if there's going to be other impacts. So we started off out here and analyzed things, and then watched the deliberations of the Gaming Commission as they considered other surrounding communities, and kind of said, well, that's interesting. They didn't, this one community made the case of public safety. The commission didn't really take a shine to that because it really isn't quantifiable or knowable or predictable, whereas traffic is something that is predicted for development as a regular basis. So I think Marie is right. We want to convey to people that we did look at a very broad spectrum of potential impacts, but we felt our best case to be designated as a surrounding community, which was the ultimate battle for us at the Gaming Commission, was to go with the impacts that we knew were the most predictable, not impacts that could just be seen as perceived impacts.
Sure. Now, so I have just two questions. One is, are you considering traffic in the entire town of Longmeadow, or just the Route 5 and the Route 91 corridor?
We are considering the whole town, but what we need to do is look at what is being considered by the process. And that is, there's another whole area out there, and that is environmental impact report and the MEPA process. And Stephen really in the very beginning advocated very hard in order to get more than one intersection in Longmeadow on the MEPA process. And that has been considered. We have 2 intersections, and that's huge. No other town has
So
had
look at air
2
quality?
Well, when they look at the whole thing, but that means that is in play. So we now have 2 intersections in town.
Okay.
But as a board, we realize that traffic is like water. You start squeezing it one way, it's going to pour the other way. So even though the process is not looking, GPI did not look at all our intersections, our own expert Parsons Brickerhoff has been looking at it, and we're considering it. So when you will read the petition, you read everything else, we're only talking about 1 or 2 intersections because
What are they?
They are
Forest Glen and Converse Street.
Oh.
But even Mass DOT has acknowledged that those 2 intersections have spillovers.
Yeah.
And the environmental impact report is really a voluminous document that includes impact on archaeological resources, environmental resources, water. I mean, it's a huge, broad-based
Pollution,
thing.
yeah.
It's called an environmental impact report, but it's the broader, even built environment, not just the natural environment.
Right.
So we went through all of this, and a lot of the traffic study was done by MGM to comply with the requirements of this MEPA,
Right.
Massachusetts
That's
Environmental
what's
Protection Act.
weird about an environmental impact is that the company that's trying to build something is the one that is responsible to do the MEPA. I always found that to be very strange.
Right.
So
But the state
agencies
are the ones who then review
it. I understand
all
all
those
that,
things.
but I always found that to be a little weird.
So I think that the big thing is that we then went to a higher level of analysis for our own intersections. And again, we looked at the whole range of things, but the one kind of gap in all of this that hasn't been studied, because quite frankly, MGM has not been required to study it, is what happens when there's either a traffic jam or an accident or something on 91, and then traffic backs up on Longmeadow 3 times in October, November, and December, once each month. 91 was shut down in either direction, and
Absolutely.
Route 5 became the bypass. And so one of MGM's, one of the baseline principles of their decision making to not designate us is that they have viewed 91 traffic is not Longmeadow traffic, even though 91 technically is in the town. There's no exits, and it doesn't have any impact.
But if there's an accident, our crews respond to it.
Our fire and EMS do, but not our police, but our fire and EMS do. And we've made all of these points.
Sure.
And so one of the things that we can't point to a study, and neither can they, about what is the impact on these episodic events where traffic shuts down and it all ends up in 91. And we certainly we've made our case to both the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as well as Mass DOT, the Department of Transportation, and they agree that this is something that probably should be analyzed and have made comments to that effect. Right. And so that's one of the hopefully next phases of this. I think the study that would be required takes many months and costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's not likely the study would be done in the timeline of our negotiating or anything, negotiating or even a possible arbitration. I think the important thing though is, it's not. We're not going to get paid. We're not going to get mitigated per car. Like counting the final number of cars isn't really what we're trying to get to. The MGM is not going to say, well, it's $1, we're going to give you a mitigation payment of $1.50 a car. You have to mitigate the traffic impacts. And with the street network we have and the transportation, the baseline infrastructure we have, there are only really a few things you can do to make traffic flow better, and that's one of the reasons why GPI specifically recommended the traffic lights. So whether the impact is 10 cars or 10,000 cars, you know, the fixes, if you will, are somewhat limited, and that's where not only do we need the funds up front to really implement those mitigation measures that were specifically identified independently, we also believe that there should be a look-back component to an agreement as in addition to. So if there are intersections that are more negatively impacted than have been predicted, we can go back to MGM and say, you know, here's the impacts.
Okay, so I've heard both of you say this, and it's absolutely my last question, and you can continue. It seems like you're both sort of saying that we may or we may not be designated as a impacted community, when in fact, as I look at the geography, we are the closest, the single closest, the community that's closest to that facility than any other community that's already been designated. Holyoke, Ludlow, Wilbraham. I mean, so how could we not be logically considered a, what's the word?
Surrounding community.
Surrounding community.
Well, we feel that we will be seriously impacted. And one of the reasons we
How
say...
could we not be impacted? We're the closest.
Because MGM says that 91, all the traffic's going to stay on 91. And 91, they are not giving that. The number of cars going up 91, they show is a huge number. But they say it really is not related to Longmeadow. It's going to stay on 91. There's not a problem with that. There'll be a few accidents that the fire will have to respond to in EMS, but this is where they're trying to separate it. We say 91 traffic is Longmeadow traffic. And I think Stephen pointed out the whole idea of the problem of 91. And I think it becomes even more complicated, and this is why we listened to GPI and we took the step to go to Mass DOT. Because GPI, again, is the traffic engineers that was hired by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. They said, your problem is 91. And he says, you better get that studied. So we went to Mass DOT. Actually, we called up Senator Gail Canderas and we said, we really need to have a conversation with Mass DOT. What can you do? She got that meeting, and we had a team of people from Mass DOT that sat down and listened to Longmeadow for well over an hour about our concerns. And we explained the Longmeadow curve. And according to GPI, that is at an F already. F is a failure.
Yes, yes.
You're going from 4 lanes down to 2.
And you've got exits.
Exits, everything going every which way.
I mean,
yes.
it's very challenging.
And when I said you have the entrance to the casino just a mile up the road, there's a little bit of backup because their parking is right there, it's going to affect Longmeadow.
Sure.
What can you do? And they said, well, they would really listen to it, especially in their comments in regards to the environmental impact report, and they did, and they were very cooperative in listening to us and talking to us and giving us what we needed to go forward in our petition. Then we went to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission because they said they're doing studies on this. And Pioneer Valley Planning Commission says those studies are way down the road. We don't even have considered that. So I think that this communication is really going to be key. And when the MGM made their petition, they said the study is being done on that exits 1 through 4. And we know Pioneer Valley Planning Commission says it's a way down the line.
So it's not going to be done before this negotiation is finished.
Oh, definitely
So tell
not.
us, so we are now in February 11th.
Yeah.
Wow, it's not very long down the road before some kind of decision is going to be made. So tell me tell us the time frame and
February 18th, we will find out if we're designated or not.
who makes that decision?
The Mass Gaming Commission.
Just says, you know, we're sitting around a table and
Yeah.
they say yes or no,
Yes.
period. So who decides that the final, okay, so still we have MGM over here with a proposal and Longmeadow over here with a proposal. It's actually like this, not like this. Who decides that?
Well, the first thing that happens is if we are designated February 18th, and I'm confident we're going to be designated. I think we made a pretty compelling case to the Gaming Commission. On the 19th, under the statute, once you're designated, you have a 30-day mandatory window to negotiate. So that would start.
So then you go back to the.
So that goes on
table.
the
Yes.
19th. We would have to
They
be.
give, you give, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're compelled by law to negotiate with MGM starting on the 19th. Obviously, we swapped proposals.
Is there a mediator in this, or just?
Not yet, not yet. So, I thought you said you had already asked your last question.
Oh, yeah.
So, just to get through it, there's a negotiating window. We go back and forth. We have exchanged proposals. You could conceivably look at those as the parameters, although once you get back into negotiation, you certainly could find a different way to skin the proverbial cat, if you will. If there's different things if we need to look at a different way to get to an agreement, I think we could do that. I know we're willing to do that. MGM, I think, has really stuck with the form of their agreement, so we have to kind of loosen that a little bit. And then if at the end of 30 days we still don't have an agreement, then the process moves automatically actually it doesn't move automatically. We have to sign on for binding arbitration, but the statute really makes it clear that the communities really are going to be compelled to sign on to go into a binding arbitration process.
Okay, explain that.
Meaning if you don't sign on for binding arbitration at the end of the process, under the statute, I believe you then basically say you give up, you forfeit your status as a surrounding community.
Well, I get that, but let's say you say, yes, we're going to participate in a binding arbitration. My memory of binding arbitration is somebody comes in and says, this is the number.
Yes.
Is my correct?
You make your bet. Each side makes their best and final, and the arbitrator and the Gaming Commission did release a guidebook for arbitrators. And so you either mutually agree on an arbitrator, or more likely one party picks one arbitrator, the other party picks another, and then those two arbitrators pick the third.
Okay.
Each side presents their case, and defends their best and final offer. The arbitrator, under the law, or under this guidebook, I should say, the MGM has to show existing surrounding community agreements. They have to present them as evidence. So the arbitrator will automatically get all the agreements that are already in place.
Public record.
Yeah.
Public record. And at that point, they can ask some questions and look at things somewhat subjectively, but the model is really choosing one versus the other.
Not a compromise.
Not a
No.
split the difference.
Oh.
Now, how that'll all play out, no one knows. Every single phase of this has been unprecedented because this whole
It's new.
system of surrounding communities being given a seat at the table legislatively is completely new in the country. It's first in the nation stuff, and so we're all kind of on the trapeze without the net, so to speak.
Right. So is there a sort of a backup, a default position? And again, you don't have to answer this if it shows your colors in terms of your negotiation, but is there a default position that sort of protects us as we get down toward this end of the 30 days of negotiating, so we don't, if you're designated as a surrounding community, we go forward. If you're not designated as a surrounding community on the 18th and 19th, we're done. The door's shut.
Well, the closest the door will be shut from an agreement with MGM.
On the 18th.
On the 18th, if we're not found to be a surrounding community.
Okay.
But in another case where they found Fitchburg not to be a surrounding community, then the Mass Gaming Commission brought something to the table.
Oh, okay.
For
So
them.
that may not be the end of the road if we're not
It's-
Under the
designated.
law, the Gaming Commission can still impose a impact fee on the developer, even if they decide that a community is not a surrounding community. And then there are funds that are built into the law that are funded by gaming revenues, mitigation funds. So individual communities that are, even if you're not designated surrounding community and you can document an impact, you can go later and apply for mitigation funds.
Right.
But I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that because we've been focused on making the best presentation we can to be a surrounding community. We think we're going to be designated, and then we're just focusing on what our next steps are. So a fallback position, it'll be a derivative of the many things we've been working on, but right now we are just focused on the process that's in front of us.
Right. So in summary, then, a big date for the town of Long Meadow and the negotiating process and all the work that your board and your town manager have been doing is February 18th.
Yes.
So
and-
by February 19th is going to be, the headline in the newspaper is going to be, Long Meadow is or is not.
Is not. And then I think the other thing he pointed out too is there will be an agreement by the end of April. If we are found to be a surrounding community, arbitration is going to end by the end of April.
Okay.
And we will have an agreement one way or another if we're a surrounding
So
community.
after, let's assume we're a surrounding community February 19th, you go into a 30-day, very intensive negotiation situation. At the end of that, if agreement is not agreed, not mutually accepted, then you go into the arbitration process
Yes.
for another 30,
That's a 60-day window, I think.
60 days, something like that.
Yeah.
So by town meeting, we all ought to be having a party, one way or another.
We'll know what's happening by
We'll know
town
what's
meeting,
happening
yes.
by town
And
meeting.
then we'll have to look to see if we can get reimbursement for our costs that we've spent so far.
And that's a different issue.
That's a whole different
And
application.
Who pays you back, the Gaming Commission or MGM?
MGM is supposed to. They can do so voluntarily, and then there's also, it will be basically another petition to the gaming. If MGM doesn't do it voluntarily, we would petition the Gaming Commission for the funds, but ultimately it comes out of MGM's pocket.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Well, we're sort of running out of our time. Summary comments, are we up to where you want to be at the end of this conversation, or you want to add something to it?
Well, I think we're in the middle of the process. It's moving along, and people should not get frustrated if there are deadlines that are changed, things that you read in paper. Realize that there will be an agreement of some sort by the end of April, and we will be moving along in the process. And right now, I think we have an excellent team. GPI, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, they're working with us with Parsons Brickenhoff, and then municipal resources, as well as the town employees, have been doing a phenomenal job. DPW's really set aside a lot of time to work on this, as well as all the other departments. The head of the library has been doing research for us, so it's really been a team effort, and I have to thank everyone.
That's great, but stay tuned for February 19th,
Yes.
when that, maybe we should talk again after that and sort of bring people up to snuff as to where you are. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
And on behalf
you.
of the community as a resident and a voter, I thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing. And again, I don't agitate over this, because I think you are all doing a tremendous job, and I appreciate that. So to our viewers, you've heard it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And appreciate you taking the time, Stephen Crane and Marie Angelides, to speak with the residents about what's going on with the negotiations between the town of Longmeadow and MGM regarding the casino, and the town of Longmeadow being compensated in some fair and reasonable manner for the impact of that historic and challenging issue that's going on in the south end of the city of Springfield. So thank you. Contact Stephen or Marie if you have questions. Be patient. Be hopeful, and good evening.